Hi guys, we're live. Today we're going to be speaking with Maynard Okereke. He is otherwise known as Hip Hop Science Show, and he's a phenomenal educator, entertainer, and does a really incredible job of spinning together pop culture with some great science education. And I love watching his videos. He's super entertaining. He's a really engaging and interesting guy, and he comes from an engineering background, but he certainly moved into the sort of science communication space. And I'm just really excited to chat with him. So I see that he's joined the chat. I'm going to bring him online, and we're going to get going. Per usual, a lot of what we're going to do is going to be sort of popping in the comments, and I'll see if I can kind of spin them into conversation. But afterwards it'll be online too. Hello, Maynard. How you doing?
Hey, what up, my man? How's it going?
Pretty good, dude. Hang on, I forgot to put my headphones in. Let me pop these in. Hi.
Hey, good to see you virtually.
Sorry, say that again?
No, I said good to see you virtually.
Oh, yes, absolutely, totally. It's fun to see you in your sort of science. I don't know if it's a science studio or education space or what that is, but you have a dedicated kind of background there.
Yeah, this is my new virtual science lab, I guess I call it. It's a pretty cool setup now because I have my computer right in front of me, so I do all my editing here, all my live streams. You know how it is in quarantine now. You have to have a little dedicated space to make everything happen, so I can customize it for whatever I need. I needed some mushroom gear so I can get like yours though.
Well, we can make that happen. Yeah, I mean,
definitely.
I sit at my kitchen or our dining room table, and I was like, well, I got to put something more interesting behind me. So I line this up, but every time my fiance walks in the door, she's like, "Oh, Gordon, does there have to be mushroom stuff everywhere?" I'm like, maybe.
I mean, she should know by now. I mean, you're fascinated by fungi. She better know what she's getting into.
Although when we got together, I hadn't even really looked at a mushroom in like 20 years. I was very focused on wine at that time. It has only been in the course of our relationship that I've gotten into it. So she didn't sign up for this necessarily, but she's on board now. So
she's on board now. Okay, she's got to. I'm sure you've given her all the new hip things that she needs to know everything about fungi. That's actually interesting to me that you got back into fungi, like you were completely on a different tip, and now you've migrated back to fungi world.
Yeah, I mean, I was, it's funny because everyone just assumes I'm an expert. And I don't have any academic background in mushrooms. I didn't study, anything to do with mycology necessarily. I got a PhD in wine and yeast fermentation, and so I was looking a little bit at like microbial dynamics and ecological succession. But most of it was really focused on just yeast, which is like a single-celled unicellular fungi kind of thing that just eats sugars. Yeah. And so it's a very different lifestyle from mycelium and what we think about as mushrooms that, are growing in symbiosis with plants or as, saprobes on dead material kind of thing. And, I learned some of the basics, but.
That's so crazy to me because all this time I've been following you, I've just assumed like, this guy got a PhD in everything fungi. He knows all the ins and outs of every species that lives in the world, understands the poisonous ones from the non-poisonous or non-toxic ones. And and then the whole cooking side, I'm like, and he's a master chef too on top of it all. I'm like, this is crazy. This is I thought I had a fusion of science and hip hop. This is a fusion of fungi and cooking and chef mastery. I was like, this is ridiculous.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think I grew up cooking a little bit, and I grew up like looking at some fungi with my parents and my grandparents kind of thing. But then, I hit like my preteen years, and suddenly everything I thought was cool as a kid, I just like pushed away, and I was like, I'm not interested. But the food thing I kept doing because I realized at some point that I was like, I got kind of chubby because I ate a bunch of like microwave burritos and Hot Pockets and stuff like that. And I was like, man, I don't feel good. I don't look good. And like I got to college and suddenly was like, oh my God, there's a reason there's a salad bar. Like you gotta.
What school did you go to?
I went to UC Santa Cruz. So I switched coasts because I'm from Boston and I hopped out to California, and it seemed kind of like. It seemed like the hackneyed thing to do to just everyone goes to California, but I was like, man, I want to go sailing. I want to like be near the ocean. I'm sick of snow.
Yep.
So
hey, we're in the same boat. I left the Northwest. I spent most of my time in the Northwest, It's great. It's beautiful. I love going back and visiting. But after a while, you could only deal with so much rain. You can only deal with so much constant gray clouds and rain and precipitation. You start to lose your mind. And I've been in LA now for like 7 years, and I love being by the water. I love being able to go to the beach in October. You know, like this is great. The environment here is everything I could have asked for.
Right. Plus, you can grab a California burrito or something when you go to the beach, and
Exactly. But I need to step my foraging game up, which I could actually probably do better of in the Northwest. And you could probably speak on that a lot more than I could. But when I go back to visit, that's something I want to partake in for sure. Is getting a little bit more into the foraging, which is crazy because it's kind of a new discovery that I've kind of come across, and I've seen, especially after starting to follow your profile. You know, it's kind of one of those things where when you notice something, or when you find one thing, you start to notice it like everywhere, right? So after I started following your channel, I started to see like other like just fungi experts and like people that just love foraging, and I'm like, I didn't even know foraging was a thing. I just didn't know like hunting around for fungi was a thing that people did on a regular basis, and it's become like super dope to me. I'm just like, this is crazy. Now I'm on the lookout for mushrooms everywhere I go. I'm just like, what's out here? What's that thing? Well, I'm still scared because I don't know edible versus non-edible yet. So I need to work on that still.
And that's a question I get from a lot of people is they're like, hey, I'm really interested, but I don't know where to start. I'm scared. And to be honest, I had the same feeling. And what happened to me is I was in New Zealand. So in a way I was isolated a little bit. And in some ways being in New Zealand made it a little safer for me to look at stuff. Because when I found something, I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure it is what I think it is, as opposed to it being something that I didn't anticipate, because New Zealand is sort of an island. So things are a little bit more isolated and the species are a little bit more clearly defined. And the problem with a lot of like mushroom books in the US is they're trying to be too broad. So if you look at the book, it'll Maynard?
Did I lose you there?
No, sorry. I had a phone call came in and just like screwed up my thing for a sec. Well, here, I'll edit it out later or something like that. What was I going to say?
Oh, you're in New Zealand. No, you're talking about the U.S. books. They're way too broad. We need to like focus in.
Thank you. So all the U.S. books are like, they'll be like, oh, well, this thing's toxic here, but edible here. And you're just like, oh my God, I don't even know where to start. It's so overwhelming. But what I always tell people is like, don't try to go out and understand what everything is. Just go out and learn what one thing is. That's all you need to do, is understand one mushroom every time you go out. And that's, I get people from LA all the time being like, hey, I love mushrooms, but there's just no mushrooms down here. And like, you can clearly tell, like, there's stuff there. You just have to key into it and be aware of it. And like, when you find one, pick it, look at it. Don't eat it, but like, smell it. There's so many sort of tactile and organoleptic things you can take away from a fungi that helps you remember what it is. You almost create like a fingerprint for mushrooms. And I think that's the best thing you can do if you're like really scared about getting started, is just go out and start messing with stuff. There's no mushroom, even poisonous mushrooms aren't going to harm you by just touching them, because those toxic compounds can't diffuse through your skin. So you're safe by touching them. And the more you interact, the more you kind of start to figure out what things are. And I think it's a safe way to get in. And there's some great resources, stuff like iNaturalist. I don't know if you've played around with that app.
Yes. Yes, iNaturalist is a great app. I use it all the time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
that's really good advice. That's really good advice, because I kind of tell people similarly the same thing when you're exploring just wildlife in general, right? Like, I just kind of go down to the basics. I started doing this like backyard science series during quarantine, just as a way to showcase all the wonderful biological phenomena you can find just like literally in your own backyard. It's one of those things you overlook because you're thinking like, oh, I'm going out to hunt for wildlife, and you're thinking like big animals. You're thinking of like things that you don't normally see that are going to stand out to you. But there's so many different organisms that are all kind of working together in symbiosis just right in your own backyard, from little things like, I did a segment on pill bugs and slugs. And I ended up finding, actually, it was crazy. I found a rare species of salamander literally in the front of my apartment here in North Hollywood. I'm like in this concrete jungle where you wouldn't expect to find an organism like a salamander just roaming around, and to that level, a rare species that hadn't been seen in this area for a long time. You know, so the little things like that is like you just kind of focus in and you just look at the little spaces. You look at the little things. You know, even if you have to pull out a microscope and you just examine a small habitat that's right there in front of you, you don't have to think on a grand scale all the time.
Yeah, no, it's such an incredible thing to, I think, you know, even you saying that it's rare, it might not be rare. It might just be something that people don't pay attention to, and thus it doesn't get observed, and thus, you know, you think that things are rare when they might actually be there the whole time. And there's an account, I don't know if you follow him, but you totally should. My buddy Damon Teague, he's like a sort of science guy who lives down in Oakland, but whenever he spends all day on Zoom doing his, you know, chats, and he's a apartment manager and all this stuff, but when he gets stressed out, which happens because there's a lot of existential stress right now, he just goes out and stress naturalizes. So he goes out to Lake Merritt, which is this, you know, big urban park lake kind of thing, but he found this incredible diversity of organisms. And similar to you, he spotted a bunch of things that are like rare species or even like undescribed species to science. He's like, bro, I'm in the middle of Oakland. There's nothing like, I'm not in the woods of like, you know, Indonesia or something discovering new species. I'm doing this right here at home. It's just a matter of opening your eyes and paying attention. And then, as you know, with science, documenting. It's not just seeing and reporting, it's taking photos, it's taking notes, it's observations of habitat, and really trying to dial things in and sharing that, because that is so much of science becomes about your ability not just to observe and catalog, but then to communicate, which is part of where I think your account really, you know, that's one of the things when I first saw it, I was like, oh my God, what a brilliant freaking concept. You're able to like take, you know, I think your tagline says, was it Bill Nye plus World Star?
Yeah, Bill Nye meets World Star. Yep. Yep. Or some people just call me the Black Bill Nye, I guess, you know, which I'll take that as well too. You know, Bill Nye was my idol. You know, I grew up like watching Bill Nye. That was just the guy. Bill Nye, Steve Irwin, Neil deGrasse Tyson. You know, those are people that I just watched, and you know, obviously I would love to emulate. To be on that level of brain capacity, but you know, it was just one of those things. I just wanted to do a different take on it. I wanted to do a take that was authentic to me and my background. You know what I'm saying? Because I grew up in entertainment, doing work in music industry, working as an artist, hip hop music. That was always like my passion, you know. But at the same time, I was always this science nerd. Like I read Nat Geo magazines, and I remember even like growing up all through like elementary school, all the way through high school, I had this like subscription catalog to these little, it was like wildlife fact cards. And I had this giant
I
binder.
remember those. Yep.
Do you remember that? It's like these wildlife finders. It was like a little pamphlet thing. You would open it up. It would give you like, it would be focused on one animal, and it would tell you everything, the habitat, where it lived, its reproduction cycles, all these little facts you need to know. And it was just the coolest thing to me. And I just used to collect them. And I just had this, I would always have random knowledge about obscure animals that people wouldn't even like think about, you know? And it was something that was just infused in me all the time. And to this day, I just still just drop random facts about creatures and, you know, watching BBC and all these different things. And I was like, why not just find a way to be able to communicate this like nerd side that I have with everything else that I do? It's hip hop, pop culture is something we absorb every day in our everyday lives, you know? And so why not talk about it? Make being a nerd cool, you know what I'm saying? Like nerds aren't just this person that, you know, with glasses that just sits in the corner and doesn't know how to talk to people or get dates or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? Nerds are cool, you know what I'm saying? We're over here talking about fungi and wildlife and exploring different things in the world. I think we need to have more of that mantra in our day-to-day lives and showcasing that you can have an interest in multiple different things, but still have this nerd side as well, and not to feel ashamed or not to feel like, oh, I'm going to get ridiculed because I know these type of things, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I would sort of, you know, as a kid, I learned things, and my way of learning was to immediately start trying to teach and communicate, because that's how I remembered stuff. And I think that's, you know, as you know, like dropping those random animal facts on your friends and family, and you might have had a lot of people like, shut up. I don't want to hear it. Like, you know, past that, you know, and no one wants to necessarily get sort of lectures from you, but like, that's the best way to learn it and internalize is to share that knowledge. And then, yeah, like you said, like I went from feeling like a really nerdy kid to being like, okay, I feel confident enough to try to share this science in a way that makes it engaging and exciting, and people are going to stop calling me a nerd and hopefully start like looking up to what you're doing, because you're now an educator and you're sharing. And you know, I had a similar experience of like really looking up to guys like, you know, Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and just taking that kind of mantra of like, okay, can I take this really interesting science and just project it out into the world in the hopes that people will pick up on it. And I got lucky back in like 2014. I was visiting DC and I walk into this men's bathroom and there's freaking Bill Nye washing his hands. And I had like a total fanboy moment, like, oh my God. And I was like,
that's crazy.
And I was like, Bill Nye, can I take a selfie with you? And he was like, let's get out of the bathroom first.
Let's get out of the bathroom first. Let's not make this weird. Let's not make this weird.
But I got it.
What chance encounter would you ever meet Bill Nye in a men's bathroom? Like, where would that ever happen?
Well, in DC apparently, but you know,
yeah,
it
that's
was one
crazy.
Of those once in a lifetime things. I'm like, I'm so happy that I had like a smartphone, that I had a camera with me to be like, oh yeah, let's do this, you know. So it was good stuff. But so I guess I'm curious about your path, because you got a degree in civil engineering, and then you know, and it sounds like you've worn a lot of hats. You've been in music, you've been doing many different things. You want to talk a little bit about your journey and kind of what brought you to Hip Hop MD?
Yeah. Hip Hop MD. Yeah. So yeah, no, my background is in civil environmental engineering. You know, I lived all over the place. You know, I was born in Texas, but my parents come from West Africa, Cameroon, Nigeria. So I lived in Cameroon for about 5 years when I was really young, came back to Texas for like a year, then ended up in the Northwest, spent most of my time like Vancouver, Washington, Portland area, and then went to school in Seattle, University of Washington.
Nice.
But you know, like I said, it's like science and exploring was just always something I always did. You know, I always loved going out in the backyards or going out to local ponds and lakes and just exploring. And I had this weird fascination with just ecosystems. It wasn't even necessarily organisms or animals in particular. It was just ecosystems that I just loved. I loved seeing just everything together, water and plants and wildlife and soil, and just how all those combination of things just came together to develop this amazing landscape. And that was just something I always thought. So I wanted to go into school, be a wildlife specialist, and kind of go on that kind of ecology side. And then I got into school and, you know, I started meeting all sorts of different people with different backgrounds. And everybody's like, you got to go to where the money's at. Go into engineering. That's where the money's at. And I'm like, I'm trying to make money. So I'm going to go into engineering and do that deal. And so it started out like with focus in environmental, and I translated into more of the civil side. And then worked with the engineering firm for a number of years after I graduated school. But like at the same time, all throughout this period of time, while even through high school early on, like I was just a hip hop head. I was in underground rap music. I was doing I was doing rap battles. Like music was just my thing. And like I was
quick question. Do you have a rapper name? Do you have a handle?
My hip hop name originally was Nautilus MC. That was my first stage name.
I like that.
Because it's not Nautilus has always been like my spirit animal.
Okay.
So like
little nod to the cephalopods, you know?
Yep, little nod to cephalopods for sure. And it was like the mystery behind the Nautilus, right? It was one of those organisms that virtually remained unchanged for millions of years. You know, it was pretty much a living fossil. And so I thought I kind of had this like mantra, because I grew up on like Wu-Tang, you know, and always had these code names and aliases. And so the Nautilus MC was like my alias. That was like my wildlife, you know, environmental alias, you know. And so I just always had
another way growing up to kind of, if you feel really nerdy about something, it's nice to project it into a little bit of a character kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, you protect yourself by being like, okay, my nerdy self is, you know, MC Nautilus kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, which is kind of in a weird way now how it's kind of come about to being the Hip Hop MD. It's also an expression of me as well too, because I play this character, you know, I'm in my lab coat and glasses, even though this is pretty much like my regular attire now, because I'm doing this like pretty much almost on a full-time basis to this point. But it's like one of those things where that persona is authentically me, because these different things that I love doing. And so it's not like I have to put in a different mindset or get into a different character. And that was one of the things that led me to getting out of engineering, was because I was so kind of I was in this corporate environment where it was like I was kind of going through this corporate lane, and it was very structured, and it was you be this and you work on these projects, and I was making good money, and I was really working on some like high level projects, but it didn't fulfill that passion, that desire. You know, I still wanted to be able to do different things, even within the science spaces that I couldn't really do. And then obviously my creative side, I just didn't have any time at all to do that, you know? And so the hip hop science really came about from me leaving engineering, coming down to LA to kind of pursue entertainment. And then in that pursuit, just finding new different ways to be able to bring excitement into different things that I loved and show people this wide variety of different things that were truly me. And that's really just how the Hip Hop MD and this hip hop science platform came to be. It was just an expression of wanting to talk about the different things that I research and I see and that I just love being a part of every day. And it's like the perfect fusion of everything that my life just really embodies. And so it's really cool to find other people that like do that as well too, which is something I really love about your page, you know what I'm saying, and what you do as well, is that you can communicate all these different things, whether it's you talking about fungi from a very scientific level to going to the kitchen and cooking and doing like it blends all these different things that normally would be kind of mutually exclusive. It brings them together, and people that have different passions about all these different things can now see you and be like, oh, this is cool. He likes the things that I do. He can talk about this, but at the same breath, you know, he can go into the kitchen and cook up some tasty things that I want to try, you know? So it makes people want to be involved and be a part of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it feels, for me, it feels a lot of like the accumulation of all the things that I've kind of, you know, many separate paths that have merged into, you know, this sort of adult version of myself. And part of that comes along with like hitting your 30s and be like, okay, I think I finally sort of got things figured out.
Yeah.
Clearly
life adulting.
Yeah, there's a lot of room for growth. But you know, it takes time. And I think that's the thing that a lot of young people sometimes feel really almost frantic about, is they, you know, they look towards people like someone like a Neil deGrasse Tyson and say, how am I ever going to get there? Right. And you're like, well, you and I are proof of it's a journey. It's a process. It takes time. You can do many different things. And in fact, it probably helps you to do many different things. You know, you might have a goal or a dream, but like, don't make it so linear that you think you're just going to do that thing the whole time. Because so many times in school and outside of school, I see people that are achieving what they want to do through alternative pathways. And even like the mycology and mushroom space is great because almost nobody I talk to has an official background in this stuff. Almost everybody I know who's like an expert in it, even the most well-known names in the field, David Aurora, Paul Stamets, those guys don't have degrees in this stuff. They've just been doing it. And that's one of those things that makes mycology and mushrooms so exciting, is it's a very democratic process. Almost anybody can approach it. And some people are like, well, you don't necessarily have time or access to go into the woods. You're like, you don't need to go to the woods. All you need really for fungi is rain. That's the big one, which is hard to get in LA. So I recommend that.
Very rare, yes.
But that being said, LA has a habitat sort of similar here to Napa, in that it's in the internal chaparral, like oak habitat, and lots of eucalyptus and stuff like that. So come January, when you actually get some real rain, like hit me up, because we can talk about where to go on iNaturalist. I know a couple of people down there. You might be able to like go out for a good hike in LA, and you'd find a surprising number of things, because it's not just going out and finding, you know, big mega fungi that are good edibles kind of thing. You can go out and you find this whole world of slime molds and tiny things, and just like you're talking about, like paying attention to the ecology and everything being connected as a whole, rather than just like trying to isolate certain things you have to focus on. And that, you know, that goes for all the super blooms and everything else too, that, you know, people love those super blooms, but like we wouldn't have those if we don't have the ecology of California, of, you know, dry summers and hopefully wet winters and springs. And again, like, don't trample plants, because then there'll be less plants next year. And so there's so much that kind of goes into it that people have to think about. So
exactly, which is it's a great point you bring up, because you need that balance, right? And that's what makes every different environment, ecosystem unique, is that kind of contrast, you know. And you wouldn't be able to get certain species to be able to develop and adapt to that prime time, you know what I'm saying, like here in Southern California, when you do have those like couple months of the year where you get rain and perfect weather conditions for that growth to occur, you're only able to get certain organisms that could be able to thrive in that moment of time. And so they take advantage of that. You know, it's a lot of times it can grow quicker, you know, so there are different elements that you could really enjoy and appreciate, even if it is only for a couple months out of the year. So that's a good thing you bring up for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'm curious, so you've built Hip Hop Science as a communication platform. And I think you've done a really effective job of spinning kind of the entertainment. And when we talk about WorldStar, for anyone not familiar, WorldStar is sort of a very, you know, hip hop focused, urban focused thing on just shocking videos. It was a form of social media before social media really took off, right? But it's still, I think culturally, it's still really important. And there's a lot of things that get presented on World Star that make a big splash in certain communities that don't reach other ones. And I think you're doing this great way of sort of spinning science in, and like you've said, that culmination of yourself and your communication. And like, I think you're reaching demographics and people that would never see this type of information, and you're doing it in a way that makes them watch it or want to watch it because it's exciting. Can you talk a little bit about like your process and what goes into inspiring you to do science communication the way that you do?
Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point about World Star. And like for people that don't really know World Star, it started out as just this like social media platform where it was just like eye-popping news that was like pop culture related, fashion related, obviously hip hop related and different things like that. A lot of times it could be sexualized. There could be, you know, elements of like crazy fights breaking out in the streets and somebody getting punched like in a crazy way. But it was all like shock value, but to showcase like the different sides of our entire world that we just don't really see, you know what I'm saying, from a very pop culture, kind of hip hop culture perspective. And the reason why I always kind of brand it as like Bill Nye kind of meets World Star is to be able to showcase science in that same kind of eye-popping, like, what? This just blew my mind. I had no idea kind of way, I think really draws that excitement in. And for me, you know, my whole focus has always been to encourage more minority involvement into the STEM fields. That's kind of the overlying arc of my platform, because as a Black person myself in the sciences, I grew up not seeing many people that look like me doing work in biology and different things. That I never had a Black teacher until, you know, like one of my classes in college, in one of my physics courses. And so you grew up not seeing representation in different things like that. And then you grow up and then you get into the work environment, especially when I was in engineering. I'd be the only minority in every single meeting that I was in my workspace. When I go to other offices, when I'm working with other engineers, nobody looked like me. So especially within science, you know, I always preach about diversity is really important in science, and then particularly within the STEM fields in general. And to be able to reach people in a different way and to be able to showcase science in a different way, I think it's so important to make that connection. Because a lot of times, you know, you have that term, right? People are always like, oh, it's not rocket science or whatever. And a lot of these different things, like they're little triggers, they're little things that kind of hit and have an impact that we don't really think about, because we get to this point where we make science seem unattainable or out of our reach or out of our mental capacity to be able to do. So you see people like Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse, right? And you're like, these guys are so, there's no way I'd be able to know this. I have to go to school and pay hundreds of $1,000s to get my PhD and do all these different things. And I want to be able to showcase that science is accessible to everybody. Like, we're all scientists in every single thing that you do, from the decision you make waking up in the morning to what we eat, the chemical energy that's happening in our bodies, to the TV shows that you watch. There's scientific elements that are in play. If you play video games, there's areas of science that go into the digital side of everything. Like, to have this just day-to-day science thought, I think is so important. And that's what I really try to do with this fusion, is to showcase the, you know, pop culture world, fashion, music, these different things that we digest on a regular basis that we never have to think about. I want to make science one of those things that we never even have to think about as being science. It's just something that's natural, something that we do and appreciate on a regular basis. And I think that's really the core of what I try to do with this hip hop science platform.
Maynard, that is the most amazing sentiment. And I just absolutely love that. I mean, the idea of can we view the world through lenses that allow us to see the science of everyday things, thus making it more relatable and bringing it to a platform that everybody can appreciate. And I think there's need to communicate with every different segment of society at every different level and make things accessible. And, you know, I had the privilege of growing up in STEM. My dad works at MIT, so I would walk around the halls of MIT. But, you know, I grew up in college dorms, and I was used to seeing a lot of people who didn't look like me in science. And that seemed pretty normal. And it wasn't until I kind of got out to the rest of the world, I was like, oh man, it's not normal that there aren't more minorities and people of color and women and just like diversity in science. You know, it's the same thing in nature. We need biodiversity in nature to have healthy ecosystems, because it provides buffering capacity against stress and external factors. Everything is able to adjust better when there's a bigger gene pool, when there's more diversity and ways of different modes of doing things. And it's the same thing in human society. We will do better if we have more diversity, we have more points of view. We are coming at STEM from a lot of different viewpoints because people's inherent cultural backgrounds sometimes prevent them from seeing things one way or another way. And there's a lot of, even especially within science, the history of science is a bunch of old white guys. So there's a lot of like little microaggressions in some of the terminology, the language, even the ways that information is presented. And so I think it's so important to like reimagine the way that we do science education and reach people. And I think what you're doing, and especially the philosophy you just put out there, is like just so absolutely, it's inspiring, you know, just for lack of a better word. I'm inspired by you, man. That's freaking cool.
No, and that's I always preach that in like workshops that I do and different keynote presentations, whatever I do. I always kind of preach that importance of diversity, and you bring it and you hit it right on the head right there when you talk about biodiversity. It's you know, we are organisms in this environment, right? We as humans are just like any other organisms that thrive in whatever ecosystem. And so the biodiversity attains to us the same way that it does to the rest of the animal kingdom. And it's so important within every ecosystem. You need that balance, and you need this wide range of just all these different organisms working together. That's how organisms are able to adapt in different ways and to be able to grow and maintain and be successful in their environments by having access to food and being able to see different things and threats and everything's in our environment. We use that, and you know, as we evolve over time, we grow and we learn how to do things better, and we learn how to be able to hone in, and it's better for us, for our future, you know. And I always tell people that, you know, the youth is our future, and the more youth that we can get engaged in the sciences, because the science field is where we're at. Everything that deals with technology, how we make things easier for us to survive, how we deal with medicines and curing cancers and all these different things. You need to be able to get new perspectives, new voices, new people in those industries in order to have that critical thinking, in order to have that assessment of different environments, different cultural awareness, how medicines affect different people, that, you know, even simple things like medical testing. You know, that's a whole nother tangent you can get into where, you know, especially minorities have been affected so differently, you know, whether it's medicines or cures that haven't been reached to certain communities. So like, it's very important to have this understanding as humans, because as we want to be able to sustain ourselves for the long-term future, we have to adapt. We have to bring in new voices. We have to reach the masses, and we have to include everybody from all sorts of different walks of life in these fields, for sure.
Definitely. And I think if anything has been proven over the last 4 years, it's that we need more scientists. We need more people who are capable of critical thought. We need people who are capable of thinking towards a future and not just like, well, the bottom line of 6 months from now is this. You're like, yeah, but like 20 years from now, we're not going to have a bottom line if we don't do something. And I think, you know, the real looming crisis is it's not just climate change. Climate change has already occurred. And I think a lot of people are still arguing about this as if it was the 70s. Like, no, it happened. It's done. Yeah. The ice caps will completely melt within our lifetime, basically. And have you watched the new David Attenborough movie?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
that was David Attenborough. Like, that guy. I mean, talk about the GOAT, right? Like, that guy there embodies everything that you could want about science, you know, and just knowledge, and just having this ability to connect to our world and make it safe and connect us to the world around us. Because you watch that movie and you see his life story, and you see these testimonials about how the world has changed over these incremental periods of time, specifically to the detail. And then to be able to assert specific things, tangible things that we can do on a day-to-day basis to help out is so important, because we need to now start making those steps in order to really be able to have a long-term impact. And I'm literally about to watch that again this weekend, just because I loved everything David Attenborough does. And now that he's on Instagram, it's dope to see him get on Instagram and then have millions of followers after like literally 2 days.
Well, he deserves every single one of them. I mean, it's really scary, because things are changing so quickly that I think so many people are sort of still backpedaling, trying to pretend it's not happening. And so many people are like, well, I guess I could consider maybe recycling something or reducing my usage a little bit. And you're like, bro, we got to be not just reducing, we got to be carbon negative if we want to stop our global, the tipping point coming where we basically will become not a dominant species on this planet anymore because we've made the environment so uninhabitable. And I think, as always, life will find a way, but it's on a scale of time.
Jurassic Park reference.
Yeah. But more microbial, but I think fungal, plant, those things will hang around and they will re-evolve. But that, when we think about that kind of thing, when you have a massive disturbance or die-off event, a mass extinction event, that's, 10 million or more years before things kind of get up and running again. And I don't think human beings have a real conception of the timeline for how little amount of time that we've been around and how much change we've affected. And the whole you know about the concept of like the Anthropocene, the way that we've so drastically changed the face of the planet, the globe, that we have entered a different age. We're no longer in one of the previous, timelines. We are in our own Anthropocene, a world of our own making. And because of that, it forces us to be the stewards of our environment. We have to be the ones to affect positive change. We can't be like, oh, well, the world will kind of take care of itself. It'll balance out. It's like, no. We threw off the balance. We used up all the buffering capacity our environment had. We burned right through it. And now we're dealing with the consequences. And that's all too real, and it's scary. So yeah, like you said, get as many people on board with science. We need as many of you young people to do science as you can.
Getting people, and the more people that we can get in science, the more people will believe in science, right? Because it blows my mind that even if we're in this stage right now, we're dealing with coronavirus, and you still got cases popping up left and right, and people still refusing to believe in the facts, and it just blows my mind at this point. And it's the science is one of those things you just can't deny. It's an innate thing. It is what it is. It's there. Deal with it. Like, we have to find ways to just move through. And the more people that we can get included in these fields and understanding these perspectives and all the dynamics that come into play, the better we're all going to be as a civilization for it. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so while I got you, I want to ask you about a couple of sort of interesting science factoids that I know you've done videos on. One is very close to my heart because I went to UC Santa Cruz, and UC Santa Cruz has a mascot, which is a banana slug. And this is funny because originally, when the school was founded in the 60s, the mascot was a sea lion. And then they left it up to the students to actually have a vote about what they wanted their mascot to be, and leave it up to the students in the 70s. They voted it was going to be this bright yellow slug, the Aurolinax, the banana slug. And so it's funny because on campus, there's this statue of a sea lion, and every year they paint it yellow and put little doodly things on it to make it look like a banana slug. So I have a real sort of soft spot for banana slugs because they're literally my alma mater mascot. But you did a great video on them, and they're fascinating creatures, right? You want to you got some science factoids for us about them?
Oh man, banana slugs are crazy, and that's funny that your school changed mascot to a sea lion to a slug. That's got to be the biggest contrasting change of a mascot ever. And I couldn't name another school in the world that has a slug for a mascot. So that definitely makes y'all unique for sure.
Yeah, it was the right school for me, definitely.
Yeah. But slugs are crazy though. Slugs and snails, these are, it's just a unique creature, right? And I think I had a better appreciation for it even after one of my recent videos that I did on this backyard science segment, because I honed in on just a segment on just slugs and snails that I find in my backyard. And that was early on in March or February when we were still, or March when we were still getting a lot of rain and different things like that. The conditions were just perfect. And so I started kind of going into this wormhole about slugs, because you think you know an organism, right? You think okay, I know the basics of slugs. I know what slugs are.
What they're slimy things that just like trails and stuff, whatever.
And you learn these random facts, and I'm all about the shock value of everything with this hip hop science platform, bringing facts that people are just like, wait, what? And I learned about a population, the sexual act that banana slugs go through. And when I found out about this, I was like, this is the craziest thing, because, obviously sex sells, right? So anything that you talk about sex, even in the animal kingdom, to understand how slugs mate, because one of those things most people will have never seen a slug mate before. So you wouldn't even have an understanding of where their sex organs derive from or what they look like. And you realize a slug has have an up to 9-inch long penis. and they mate by entangling their penises together, and then the act of biting it off to separate themselves after the sexual act is done. Like, I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. I'm like, what? I'm like, do people understand what's taking place here in our backyards? Banana slugs. And so you find this organism that you think is so basic, so standard, and it's like, okay, this slow moving slug or whatever is not that interesting. You find that they have the most dynamic, interesting, obscure behavior of any animal in the animal kingdom, and that just blew my mind when I heard about that.
Yeah, I mean, they're incredible organisms because they're all hermaphrodites, which alone puts our human, dichotomy of sex into question. Like, everything's a hermaphrodite. They all, so whenever they mate, they're both exchanging sperm and receiving, and they have those like long curvy penises. Like, I think the banana slug has the second longest penis to body size ratio of any animal besides this one barnacle, and a barnacle has to like reach around the rock, so that's it gives itself a reach around.
Yeah, that's another one, right?
You do your own barnacles too, but and then apopulation is that process of like, I don't think it happens every time, but after some mating events, like one of the banana slugs will eat the other one's penis, and it's not clear if that's like, is it a dominance thing? Is it a nutritional thing? Is it just because it was hungry? Like,
it's weird. I mean, there've been so many theories about it, right? One theory is like, the act of having sex, it takes a lot of energy, and a lot of times when you exert a lot of energy, you have to find the first food source that's close by. And if you just got done mating with your 9-inch long penis, that might be the first thing you consume, So animalistically, it makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. I will say that I'm glad we don't do that. I've never been, fearful of losing my dong after a good session.
It's crazy because you think about these different things that like you said, that the slugs, snails are naturally hermaphrodites, and there are a lot of animal species that are just naturally hermaphrodites, and it's one of those biologically like evolutionary traits that just have to maximize their ability to reproduce, right? Because everything in the animal kingdom is about reproduction. How quickly can we reproduce? How can we continue the lineage of our species as effectively as possible? And being a hermaphrodite is just innately one of those things that happens in nature. And so I'm always keen on these applications that are very normal in nature, how they apply to our everyday life. It's funny because I have a video that I haven't started doing it yet, but I've drafted out one of my YouTube videos that I'm gonna do, and and it's gonna go into this weird tangent of kind of like that on that sexual side. But just talking about how certain species can disguise themselves as being like either a different sex, or being a different species altogether.
Like the sneaker male concept.
Yeah. It'd be like a sneaker male, different things like that. And then even just how certain species can use like biomimicry and different things like that to look like another species and whatnot. And I'm gonna make this kind of human reference to there was a story about this girl that she pretended to be black her whole life, right? And she grew up white. She was white, but she curled her hair. She kind of put on dark, and she presented herself as this black woman. And then again, she was a teacher. She was an educator and all these different things. And she was talking about her black lifestyle and growing up black and all these. And it came out that she was never actually black. But I'm going to do this video where I make this correlation of how that's like kind of natural in the animal kingdom. And like organisms try to be for different purposes. It could be for defense. It could be to evolve, or it could be to maximize their food resource, whatever it may be. I'm going to find some unique tangents. I always like doing stuff like that because I think it's really cool to find those actual human applications and see how they're interpreted in the animal kingdom. Because in the animal kingdom, a lot of those things are very natural and things that we see today. I'm sure you see a lot of that in the fungi world as well.
Oh, dude, sex in the fungi world is wild. There are So, we have a concept of gender, and I think a lot of animals have sort of dichotomy of gender. And there's some things like insects that have a little bit more flexibility, but for the most part, there's generally sort of two genders in most parts of the animal kingdom. And for plants, it's a similar type of thing, that there's often sort of a male and a female component. Fungi, on the other hand, have what are called like mating loci. So it's basically a set of alleles, and those alleles, they have to be different sets of alleles for them to meld. It's kind of like you've heard of like the major histocompatibility complex in humans. We have a set of our genes having to do with our antibody production, and often this gets expressed in your BO basically. So if you're with somebody and you're like, man, you smell so good to me, it's because like evolutionarily you guys have a pretty good complementation of different antibodies and stuff like that. And so fungi do this, but they're working on these mating loci alleles. Okay. And some yeast, for example, have just two. There's A and alpha. So you need to have, like, if you have two spores to come together, if you have two alphas, they won't shmoo and mate. But if you have an A and an alpha, they'll form these little shmoos, they'll meld, and then they mix cellular components, and boom, you got a new yeast. There are some fungi, like the split gill, which is Schizophyllum commune. It's a really common little wood decay fungus. You definitely see that down in LA. Okay. That has like 23,000 different mating loci, so like potentially 23,000 different genders. Can you imagine how many like mixes and combinations of gender that you have with a fungi? Like in general, fungi just look at these categorizations that we as humans put down and are just like, screw you, I'm gonna do what I want.
Yep. and it's funny because we're in a weird way, we're at the point now where we're actually starting to recognize that more, right? Because before it was very gender based, male, female. And, and even how you refer to people, he, her, like we're starting to transgender and all these different sexual lives. We're now like having an understanding that there are people that have these different, lifestyles that identify as different types of gender. And we're not fully there yet, but we're trying to be more inclusive and understanding of different things. But it's been a learning process for us. But we're actually, in a weird way, starting to become more like the animal kingdom that's around us. Right. You know what I'm saying? There's been transgenderism in animals is a very normal thing. Many fish species can change, can start off being born as male and turn into female over the course of their lives, or from female to male, depending on their environment and depending on what conditions are in their environment.
What nutrients are available, what the quorum says. I mean, I know you mentioned in one of the videos, and like one of the things that I ran into back in my scuba days is there's a fish called sheephead, which is born, they're all born female and they're born fairly small. And then depending on like the local population, a fish will start to transition. So it'll undergo like a set of genetic changes and become a male, which is much larger, has this giant sort of like bump on its head. And honestly, when I was diving, sheep's head was some of my favorite, because like the big males would just kind of come hang out with you. If you're like sitting there, I was like taking photos of an anemone or something like that, and you just like look up and there'd be a sheep's head like 2 inches from your face, just kind of like, those fish are great. And it's a great point. Like homosexuality is common in the entire animal kingdom. Almost every birds and all mammals and stuff exhibit it at pretty much the same rate. Like 1 in 10 is kind of so it is amazing once we start to look more at the natural world, realize that some of the constructs that we've overlaid in ourselves are almost unnatural, right? We're just animals.
Yeah, we're just animals at the end of the day. We're a very advanced species psychologically and different things like that. But that's great, because that advanced psychology, that advanced critical thinking can eventually also be our undoing as well too. But when you look at the very core context of who we are just like every other animal in the animal kingdom, with multi-genders, with different transitionings, with different sexual behaviors and fascinations and relationships and
mating habits, like the clothes we put on, the makeup we wear, the way we present ourselves, even the music we choose to kind of like be our entrance theme kind of stuff.
Yeah. That's something just fascinating to me. It's just so cool when you explore and you understand that side of nature, and to make that connection to us. And I think that's another, when we're talking about this fusion, right, of trying to get people to appreciate science more, is that relatable factor, because it's like, when we first learned those facts, it blew our minds. And then when we're able to tell other people and communicate it in different ways, and communicate it with different pop culture things that we see, saying that we look at when it's a headline on a news show. That's why I started one of my posts that I started doing this kind of headline, kind of newspaper type look graphic, right? And I wanted that visual to be just like we see a headline on any sort of news break, whether it could be CNN or Huffington Post or whatever news outlet that you watch. You see a headline that draws you in. You're like, wait a minute, what? And you want to research that. It could be on a pop culture magazine. It could be hip hop related, whatever it is. It's something that draws your eye. And I wanted to make that graphic very science focused, right? So where you see a headline, You know what I'm saying? It could be about population. It could be about, I did one recently about how black licorice can kill you. And like all these, and you're like, wait, what? You know, and it's something that we are part of every day. It could be whatever we eat. It could be something that we've seen that we thought we knew about it. And then you see this headline and then I want to dive into like the cool science facts about that, you know, but that I think little things like that are things that we can do day to day to really have this intrinsic understanding and just fascination about the scientific world around us.
Right. And that's smart. You use the concept of clickbait, but when people click on that, you're actually providing the substance, which is one of the things I love is there's so much hype out there, but so little substance, especially once everybody starts reposting other people's clickbait and you like go and you're trying to, where's the proof of any of this kind of the stuff that made me click on the article? And so I appreciate communicators like you who are like, hey, I'm going to draw you in, but I'm also going to teach you while you're here. And I'm going to give you the legit science facts and potentially give you the tools and the interest to go out and learn more yourself, because we live in an age of Google. You know, people have more access to education than ever before, and yet they seem almost dumber than ever before. And I think that's because misinformation has become that much more accessible. And as you know, it's so much easier to make a lie sound more exciting than the truth. And I think
100%.
The real challenge of science communicators is how do we make science sound even more interesting, even more compelling, and back up what we're saying in a way that people will believe us and want to learn more themselves. Because I cannot ever educate somebody enough in like a 1-minute video to convince them that what I'm saying is real. But hopefully we get them excited enough that they can go Google it themselves, and they're going to Google like the scientific name, which is always going to help you find out more about an organism than if you're just Googling like the common name. And sometimes that's so much about how you phrase a question depends on the kind of answer you get back.
No, so you're right, because everything is so much more accessible, which is the great thing about the world that we're in right now, having access to the internet and to be able to literally just at your fingertips be able to get the answer to everything you want. But with how much information out there, there's just as much misinformation, and you are a microcosm of what's around you. So if people around you are saying things are going to get filtered, even search engines are going to get filtered to what you're normally seeing, to what's your kind of your frame of reference is. And so if you're already in a bad frame of reference just from the world around you or different things that you've already been exploring, you're just going to continue down that wormhole, you know? And so it's this access to information, but it's also trying to get access to the right information and giving people the tools that they need to figure out what are the good platforms, what is a frame of thinking that I can now start to visualize that will now open up all these different areas that I didn't even know were out there, you know? So that's really key that you brought that up for sure.
That's cool. So I got one more thing I want to ask you about, because I was just like scrolling through your Instagram and I saw this and I didn't even know you've been involved in this. Were you on Shark Tank?
I was this last episode, this last week Friday. I was my company was on Shark Tank. Yep. We signed a deal with Barbara Cochran, and we are doing business right now. I have a seasoning company. Oh, it's more than a seasoning company. It's called Jada. We carry a line of vegan seasonings, and we have a plant-based chicken product. And we debuted the plant-based chicken products on Shark Tank this past Friday. And it's been awesome, man. That's my outside of being the hip hop MD, that's
what you're doing.
Work that I've been doing myself and my business partner. We started that about 4 years ago. And Barbara believed in the brand. She believed in the product, and we signed a deal. And it's been the craziest. This has been by far one of the craziest weeks of my life. It's been like nonstop work. It's been like a nonstop grind, but it's been so much fun. Like, it's been cool because I mentioned my hip hop science platform on the show. I don't know if you've actually seen the episode yet. But if you have Hulu, you can watch it on demand on Hulu or on demand on ABC. But yeah, I mentioned my hip hop science platform, and since then I've been getting a lot of traction to the platform, which has been awesome. So that's another reach to the masses of getting people appreciating science. So I was glad I was able to simultaneously handle both of them, being a part of the show. But it's been an amazing experience, and it's like my workload went from here to it's crazy right now.
Hopefully it's a good thing. I mean, I when I was working sales around the Bay Area, I was visiting a lot of companies that were doing either mycoculture, so growing foods with mycoprotein, and there's a dog food company, there's places that's making bacon. I visited some of the cellular agriculture companies too, so they're making recapitulating animal protein in bioreactors and stuff like that. So I'm super excited to see this emerging field of alternative protein. And I don't, some people are like, oh, I'm going to eat steak till I die. And like, have fun getting colon cancer. Like, good for you, dude. But like, there is going to be, like we talked about, in that tipping point with the environment where it becomes not just necessary, but like it's going to be our only choice to eat alternative proteins. And because it's going to be the only thing that's sustainable enough to feed everybody. And so I'm really excited. I love seeing, people, to me, it doesn't matter if it's vegan or vegetarian. It's more just that it's more sustainable. I will continue to eat meat, but I eat meat and what I try to do a responsible way. I eat like weird stuff like feet and tongue, and I try to buy it from the farmer's market and that kind of thing. So I'm like supporting sustainable practices, but there's a need to fill the void of all of the chicken nuggets and the ground beef and all this other stuff that Americans love to eat. And so I'm stoked to hear that you're part of that movement. And I didn't even know that till like, an hour ago when I was scrolling through. I was like, holy cow, you do this.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's the thing, as somebody in science, what I'm saying? Like, I'm always, I didn't grow up being a vegan or anything like that. And I still eat other meat products, but like, I want to be part of that wave of really finding out what are alternative ways, what are sustainable things that we can do to reduce our impact on the world, reduce our impact on the environment. And obviously going towards more plant-based different things is very important to do that. And even on the fungi side, there's lots of studies right now on microbial organisms that they're using to develop proteins and different things like that as well too. So that's another expanding field of another alternative source, because right now we're using plants and different things, but you can use certain algae. You could use other microbial organisms to now be able to grow different proteins and different elements that you need. So it's been cool exploring and being in that lane now. And I'm hoping to continue to expand and eventually be able to get with those like top high level brands that are doing a lot of those type of scientific research in that lane. I think it's definitely a field that's going to continue to advance, and that's going to be much needed for all of us.
For sure. We should talk outside of this, because I got a couple of hot tips and people I can introduce you to that I think will help in that journey.
Nice.
So it's a good one. But so we're coming up on the end of the hour, and I want to ask you, I didn't have this question planned, but I haven't talked about it. Who's the smartest MC? Who's the best rapper out there that for intelligence, like who are the most like cerebral rappers that you can think of? Because I got a couple off the top of my head, but I'm curious who you think who tops your charts.
That's a good question. If I'm gonna go old school and new school. All right. So
okay. Yeah, definitely. There's a wide spread of hip hop here, and not everything is comparable.
I told you I grew up on Wu-Tang. So I'm gonna go to what the genius himself, GZA.
That's my number one. Me too.
Like you're talking about genius. You're talking about smarts to be, and that was like my early entrance into like science. You know what I'm saying? Like even if you like look at Inspector Deck's first verse on Triumph, born atomically, there is these highest philosophies and hypotheses got me talking about this discovery. It's like it's like the most scientific line that you can possibly start. I'm born atomically. You're talking about atoms and molecules, and that entrance, that like just that symbolism alone just sucks you in, and that's how you talked about rap names earlier, and me going to Knowledge MC. That was my entrance, was like, I have to have a scientific element of me because of that. But GZA embodies that element. He's talked about everything from astronomy and space and quantum physics and mechanics and all these different things like that, and finds a way to seamlessly just put them in a verbal format that's just so eye-popping. And then if you think about like new school, it may not even necessarily be from a like true like typical scientific perspective, but you look at artists like Kendrick Lamar, right?
He's a smart dude. I mean, it doesn't necessarily express his science, but you can tell he's intelligent.
You can break different things down in a psychological way, right? Because psychology is a form of science, understanding intrinsically how humans behave, why we behave a certain way, how those fundamentals of our behavior impact others, impact different things around us. I think that, it doesn't have to necessarily be your typical frame of science where you're thinking about, atoms and molecules, different things like that, but you just look at that innate understanding of who we are as people and why we do different things and how our actions and behaviors affect others. That right there is a true scientific element that certain artists like Kendrick Lamar portray today. So that's kind of my contrast of like old school and new school today. But that's why I think it's always cool to find hip hop elements. And I started out doing this platform breaking down certain song lyrics and understanding the truth and falsehood in different lyrics, from a scientific perspective. So breaking down different artists and their lyrics is always something that's really cool to me.
Yeah, and I love those videos too. When you kind of like zoom in on a song, you're like drawing these parallels with science and the lyrics, and it's
someone in the chat said MF Doom. Yes, MF Doom as well too.
MF Doom for sure. Yeah, it's a good
classic.
One. Gift to Gab to Lib. And there's a lot of guys out there.
Yep.
Yeah, and again, I'm ready to see more science rap. I want some like straight up just like rap to me about DNA repair enzymes and stuff. I want some people go deep on it.
Yep.
Anyhow. I want to say thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I love following your account. If you guys don't follow Maynard, go follow him. He's on Instagram. He's on YouTube, TikTok, all the things. You got a website. You have a vegan meat company. I mean, this man wears a lot of hats. He wears some cool headphones. And yeah, just thank you so much for coming on and yakking it up with me.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. This has been awesome. And I'm looking forward to seeing more new crazy fungi news. And I'll be hunting around and sending you random pictures and whatnot. I'm gonna get on this trend for sure, 100%.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much, and have a good weekend. Right?
All right, my man. Good talking to you.
Right. Peace.